Hello, I'm Cara Dahl Russell, and I'll be sharing with you some insights into the life and work of Beethoven, and in particular leading up to a performance of his Symphony No. 7. When I gave this pre-concert lecture live in 2019, I started by asking the people to raise their hand if they came to see specifically one of the other works that was on the program that day. And then I asked them to raise their hand if they came largely to hear the Beethoven Symphony No. 7, and the majority of hands went up for that, as I expected. And I will toss in, I did ask people who were season ticket holders to hold up their hands too, because, bless them, season ticket holders have a special place in allowing an orchestra to know that it has a stable base for the whole season. So anyway, I saw from that response what I expected, a confirmation of the popularity of Beethoven and his primacy in the hearts of orchestra and symphony-going audiences. Many composers rarely have their work performed during their lifetime. The lucky composers have enough recognition of their work to have it performed during their lifetime by an important orchestra. With that, there is a hope that the work will survive beyond the lifetime of the composer and that their reputation will grow. With Beethoven, we have the rarity. By the time of his death, Beethoven's contemporaries already recognized his place in music history alongside Bach, Handel, and Mozart. Leonard Bernstein explained the accessibility of Beethoven this way, quote, "Everything Beethoven did was a gloss on something that had already been done, a revolutionary step, breaking out of the mold, but the mold is always visible behind what he does. He works with rather conventional structures and does unusual and rule-breaking things within that structure." End quote. This means that many of his larger works had an immediate accessibility and popularity. Bernstein continued, quote, "Everything was so unpredictable and yet so right. It all checks, it all works out. That makes his form perfect. How he had this, nobody knows, because he struggled. He scratched out. He never left his rooms. He went crazy. He would say, 'I'm writing only the tip of the iceberg of what I really feel, of what I could really write.' And if you look at his sketches, you see the crossings out, the agonies he went through. And what has finally appeared as the final product looks as if it was simply phoned in from God. That's what's so incredible. He wrecked himself. He spent his whole life trying to achieve this inevitability. That's the word," unquote. Inevitability. That translates into accessibility, which translates into popularity, even with the unexpected elements along for the ride. Even when Beethoven was breaking the rules, we have to remember that Beethoven was not interested in dissonance for its own sake, but only within his own exploration of structure. Beethoven said, quote, "The future is not in dissonant chords or strange sounds. The future is in ideas," unquote. The esteemed concert pianist Berlin Philharmonic reminds us that an often overlooked facet of Beethoven's music is his humor. Often the element of surprise in his works, all of his works, from piano sonatas to chamber works to symphonies, it is the humorous element, often a combination of syncopation, repetition, and melody. Now, another thing that Leonard Bernstein posited about Beethoven was that, quote, "Beethoven was not a great melodist," unquote. And he used this symphony, Symphony No. 7, as an example Bom, 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 and so on. Bernstein said, quote, "This is one of the most unremarkable melodies ever written, one of the most famous, but you can't even really call it a melody. You like it, so do I, but you can't call it a melody," unquote. And Bernstein pointed out that Beethoven wasn't even a particularly adept harmonist, that the harmonies of that melody are very simple. Now, the easy argument against that statement about Beethoven not being a melodist is Beethoven's Ninth, with one of the most memorable melodies of all times, immediately accessible, hummable, and popular. Joyful, joyful, we adore thee, God of glory, Lord of love. So, this reinforces that even when you are listening to the opinions of great artists who are extremely familiar with the composer's works, you have to keep thinking for yourself. Continue listening, continue learning, and continue to reevaluate things that have been said as if they were carved in stone. Sometimes when a great artist like Bernstein is making a statement, it is only the statement of what they are thinking that day and that moment. And that's something we have to be careful about when we memorialize and immortalize every interview and even pre-concert lectures. If we are doing our due diligence and we continue learning, our opinions can shift and change the same way it does with people who are constantly studying and reevaluating music. And hopefully, our opinions are always growing in depth and complexity. Bernstein continued to say, quote, "There is no aspect of Beethoven of which you can say he is great. As a melodist, harmonist, contrapuntist, tone painter, orchestration, you can find fault with all of them. If you take any one of these elements, you find nobody. There's nothing there. As far as his orchestrations are concerned, they are bad. He has trumpets sticking out here, drowning out everybody else. You have to constantly balance the sound. What makes his music interesting is the form." End quote. You could tell that Bernstein was searching and thinking of a way to say this. And interestingly, his contemporary, choreographer Bob Fosse, was the one to hit on the phrase that is now quite popular and omnipresent that Bernstein was trying to say about Beethoven. That quote of Bob Fosse's being, quote, "The whole is greater than the sum of the parts," unquote. Like a great beauty that may not have a lovely nose or a nice profile or no symmetry, but still has a remarkable, captivating beauty. Bernstein was trying to say that while any one element of Beethoven may not be so remarkable, that when you put them all together, the symbiosis of the elements comes together in a perfect way that continues to speak to us today. The whole is greater than the sum of the parts. Beethoven Symphony No. 7. Enjoy.